Are you an artist who likes to draw architecture, and because of this, you've watched a lot of videos on perspective, and you watch them and you feel like you understand what they're saying, but when you go to draw and you try and combine what you've seen with what you're drawing, it doesn't seem to make any sense at all, and you're left wondering, what's wrong with me? Why do I understand the videos, but then I can't apply them? Take heart. The real problem is that these videos trace their origins back to training material for architects and to suit the needs of architects, not the needs of the artist. So, perspective in its simple forms is far easier to understand than we think. But we need to get away from these technical drawings that were designed for a different purpose than what we have, and just understand in general terms what perspective is, and then learn how we can, in a very simple way, make it work for us when we draw. Now, basically, perspective is how something looks from a particular viewing position. If we change our viewing position, then what we're looking at changes how it looks. But more precisely, in general, plain, simple, easy to understand words, perspective describes how something becomes smaller as it moves further away. So I'm looking at this wall here, and basically the whole wall is the same distance from me. The variation between here and here and here is so minimal, we'll just say that this whole wall front on is the same distance. So none of this is further away. So none of this is going to change or be distorted. But if I move to one side, I change my viewing position dramatically. And now this section of the building is closer to me than this section. And so it gets smaller. That means that although this height and this height are the same, this one is going to be smaller because it's further away. But things also get smaller, not just vertically, but horizontally. So from here to here, here to here, and here to here are each the same distance. But from here to here and here to here, this one has gotten smaller. It hasn't just gotten shorter, it's gotten narrower. And here to here has gotten narrower again because this part of the wall is further away than this part. So it's also shorter and narrower. And this section is significantly further away from us than this section, so the difference between here and here is greater. That's it. That's what all these little boxes on planes and vanishing points and so forth basically are saying, that objects get smaller as they move further away. And that's our first point. It's not just the spaces that become smaller, but the individual windows, because they are the same size when we view them front on, they relatively to each other become shorter and narrower as they move further away. But the second point is to do with what we call eye level, or you may hear it as the horizon line. I use eye level because it says what it is. It's easier to understand. I think horizon has some issues with it that are confusing, whereas eye level tells us that it's the level of our eyes or the camera in viewing the object. And eye level is important because it's not just changing how we see something by moving from side to side in the first example, but when we change our eye level by moving up or down, that also very much affects what we see. This same very old outhouse, when we look straight on from sort of the middle, looks very different to when we're right down on the ground looking up when we've dropped our eye level. We're seeing up underneath things much more than we do here. Or if we go much higher with our eye level, we're sort of looking down on it and we don't see underneath in the same way, but we see details down here that we don't see here. So changing our eye level does change what we see and how we see it. But really what we need to know is that where we have horizontal lines on a building, and in this case, the mortar lines between the rows of sandstone blocks provide those, where we have eye level, we actually get a horizontal line. Now, this is very close to eye level, and so we come very close. This line angles up ever so slightly, but we're pretty close. Eye level, therefore, is probably going to be slightly above. And above this, we can see that the horizontal lines increase in angle as they go up. And if we go below the level of the eyes or the camera, then we can see that the same thing happens. And we need to bear in mind that sometimes eye level is below or above what we can see. So here we can see that all of these lines are increasing in angle. And this one, if we peer through the grass, is not quite horizontal. It's still angled down slightly. So eye level is probably about here. And if we look at this other extreme, look at these top lines. Whoops, they're a bit hard to see, but we can see down here that with this bottom line, the angle is the most extreme, that as they move further down here, they become more angled, which means that they're moving further away from eye level. So eye level is going to be above here somewhere. About there is my guess. And these lines going off in the other direction do the same thing. The angle increases as they move further down away from the eye level. Which brings us to our third point. We don't need to worry about this. We can just look for the patterns and copy those. So what we learn is that wherever the eye level is or the camera level is, that with any horizontal lines that we have, increase in angle in either direction as they move further away. I think of this as the fan shape pattern. So whenever I see a scene, such as here, I'm looking for the fan shape pattern. I can see that there's a line that comes this way, and there's a line here that angles down the other way, so eye level will be between here. This angle is flatter, so eye level is going to be higher up, and I think it's, if we look at this coursework, yeah, eye level is not quite there. That does slope down slightly, but this one slopes up. So eye level is going to be in between here somewhere. So there doesn't have to be any discernible line or architectural details on eye level, but that's where it is. And above and below, the angles will change direction and increase in angle, become more angled as they move in either direction. If I understand the pattern, then that lets me see it more easily when I draw. And if I realize that eye level may be close to the center of my main object, subjects, or it could be way down below the level of my main subjects, or it could be above the level of my main subjects, then I know what I'm looking for and it's easy to find. And the clue, the answer, lies in simply looking hard at what I'm drawing. Once I find eye level, I know that every horizontal line as I go upwards needs to change angle. It's a common mistake to do one angled line and then just make all the others parallel. But I think you can see that this one does look more realistic, where each of these angles up higher as it goes above eye level, because we have this fan-shaped pattern happening. These all end up forming a wedge. The fourth point is when we get an object, an architectural subject particularly, that has things lined up on the same horizontal level. Now in this case we have these windows, so that makes sense that they're going to form a perspective angle. But what we need to remember is that everything that lines up horizontally will form our perspective angle, even if it's not actually part of the wall, but it's an architectural decoration. So here to here is actually parallel to all the horizontal marks. And therefore the imaginary line between the top of this and the top of this actually joins the pattern that we know to look for, that the angle between this and this will be greater than whatever horizontal line is immediately beneath it. And also that this further one, because it's further away than this one, will be shorter and narrower. This distance is very different to that distance, despite the fact that they're the same size. It's a common mistake to overdraw the size of the further one if we're not looking out for these patterns. If we know what to expect, it's easier to see it clearly in our reference. And sometimes it may be a more complex subject, but even things such as the tops of the chimneys, if these chimneys line up horizontally on the facade at the same level, then they're going to form an angle line that will match up with the fan-shaped pattern. So we can see that this line slightly slopes down, this line slightly slopes up, though the upper one slopes more slightly. So eye level is going to be closer to that one, which actually lines up in this case with the eye level of the people in the scene, because they're on flat ground at the same level as the ground level of the building, and I'm on the same flat ground, so their eye level is roughly the same as my eye level holding up the camera. But that's not always the case, so we can't assume that the eye level of people in our scene will line up with the eye level of the actual scene. But getting these angles lined up goes a long way towards capturing an effect of realism in our drawing. Now, the fifth point is this. But first, while I have nothing against these, and these can be a useful way of understanding a bigger picture of perspective, and we may want to understand more precisely how and why objects change when we change our viewing position by moving one side to the other or up or down. When I'm drawing, and I'm talking about now when I'm drawing from a photo or from life, I don't need to understand any of this. What I need to do is to carefully observe my building or whatever object it is. Because if I look carefully at this, I can see that this angle increases when it goes up here, and this angle increases with this, and this angle increases with the tops of some of the roof lines, and the angle increases with the tops of the chimneys. And so when I draw, I don't need to have a horizon line or an eye level line and vanishing points going off. I can eyeball this and increase them. And what I find helpful is to find eye level, that's the horizontal line, or where one would be. And then what's the greatest angle? And now I know I need to fit all of the horizontal lines between the two in my fan-shaped pattern. And careful observation is the way I'm going to do that. I've drawn this directly in ink. I certainly haven't drawn guidelines to vanishing points and whatnot that I've erased. Every line I put on the paper is going to be there at the end. So I don't want to put these sort of marks on what I draw. And because I'm not imagining this, I'm drawing what I can see. Careful observation for the artist when they're drawing from a reference, whether it's a photo or whether it's in life, is actually the key. Some level of understanding of how perspective works helps us to see what's happening more easily, more accurately, more quickly, and that can be nice, but it's not necessary. And if I find this confusing and unhelpful, then I'm better off just putting this to one side and really working at my powers of observation and then of drawing accurately what I've observed. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope this has been helpful for anyone struggling with perspective, that it's liberating from feeling that what's wrong with me, why can't I apply this to real life? The problem's not you, it's this video and its shortcomings that it doesn't tell you about. So I hope this lets you smile when you draw buildings and think about perspective in any way. I have several perspective playlists. Please check them out if you haven't looked through them and find the one that's perhaps most targeted to what you're looking for. But in the end, whatever you're doing, however you draw it, whatever videos you do or don't use, and however much you understand them, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.